So let's have a proper look at JUnit. JUnit is the test execution framework that we're going to use. We've already seen a little bit about JUnit because we have added it into the POM and we have created a first WebDriver test using it. But we're going to take a look at JUnit in isolation for a little while so you see what it does, some of the flexibility around it, some of its usages. A lot of people get hung up on the fact that JUnit, unit test framework, and we're going to be using it in a non-unit testing context. But the important point is it's our test execution framework. It's what we're going to use to build up suites of tests. It's what we're going to use to run our tests within. It's what we're going to use to collate the results and assert whether the conditions that we're testing for have happened or not. It's our execution framework. So don't get hung up on the JUnit name. It's an execution framework. So as before, the home for JUnit is JUnit.org. JUnit.org has a lot of good documentation on JUnit and how you use it. And it is worth, with all the tools that we're using here, it is worth reading the documentation. And as with all the tools that we're using here, the most up-to-date documentation is in the actual source code itself. And if you have a hunt for blog articles, you'll find more information on JUnit. Because JUnit has an enormous amount of flexibility. Now, when I first started with Selenium, we were using TestNG, and we used TestNG for our test execution framework because it had data-driven testing support that was a little bit better than JUnit, and it seemed to offer better suite management and various tagging. JUnit has undergone constant improvement over the last couple of years and is now astonishingly powerful. It's just that a lot of the power comes from writing your own custom runners or JUnit rules, and some of those parts of functionality are hard to find within JUnit. They're almost hidden. They're well documented through blogs rather than the actual JUnit documentation. For our initial purposes with WebDriver, we don't need to know very much more than what we're going to cover over the next 5 minutes. But still, have a look through the JUnit website and get a feel for JUnit itself. So, JUnit basics. In order for us to use JUnit, we add it as a dependency to the POM. You've already seen that. In fact, you've already seen me add version 4.10 rather than 4.8.1 as I've documented here. You know about JUnit.org, and you know that in order for a method to be treated as a test, in the JUnit 4 version that we're using, we annotate the test with @test. In JUnit, we assert that conditions happen through the use of the assertion methods: assert true, assert equals, assert false, assert null, assert not null, etc. And the assertions take the form of a message, the expected result, and the actual result. And if you get in the habit of always putting a message in, always putting a description in, your tests will be more readable. You don't have to put the description in, so a lot of people in their tests don't put the description in. But then what happens is they get used to not putting it in. They get used to not making their tests readable. One thing we want to do with our test code when we use it in production is make our tests as readable as possible, because that makes them as maintainable as possible, and that starts communicating our intent better. Even if we don't build up any abstraction layers in our tests, the fact that our assertions have descriptions and messages in them makes our tests more readable. So here's an example. Here's a very example of JUnit on its own without using Selenium or WebDriver or anything else. So you can see that in order to use JUnit, we have to import the JUnit test annotation. You can see here that I've imported the assert equals, and I've imported it statically. That means I don't have to write assert equals in my test. Now the test class itself has test in there. This is an important point to remember, because Maven by default will run tests that have test on the name. If you don't put test on the name, you'll have to write additional code in the POM file for it to pick up and run as part of the Maven test command. So get in the habit of using this test in your name, and try and make the name as expressive as possible, because in your test documentation, you have a number of documentation points. You've got the class name, that can be expressive. You've got the test name, that can be expressive. And you've got the assertion message, that can be expressive. Now you can see here, I haven't done that. Well, in a sense I have, because I'm expressing to you that this is just a JUnit example. It doesn't do anything else, it's just an example. And this is a basic JUnit test. Now I could have called this 2 + 2 = 4 test. I could have said, when I use assert equals as my class name, I could have done a whole bunch of things to make the test more readable. So let's have a quick look at a JUnit test in IntelliJ. Okay, so let's just create a JUnit test in here. So first things first, our POM has JUnit in here as a dependency. Let's tidy this up a little bit. So we currently have 2 dependencies in our POM. We have a very, very simple POM here. It just has all the metadata for our test. It has a dependency on JUnit 4.10 and it has a dependency on Selenium. So when I start writing my JUnit test in here, I know that JUnit is already in here as a dependency, so I know I can do all my imports. So let me create a new package to put this in. I'm going to do com.selenium simplified. In fact, I'll put it in here. Selenium simplified.JUnit. There we go. So let me create a new class. I'm going to recreate the example that we had there. So JUnit example test. Let's get rid of this. So I need to annotate my method with that test. You can see that it has imported it up here. It's marked as red because there is nothing to annotate. We haven't created the method yet. So I'm going to create a test. I'm going to call it 2 + 2 = 4, because that's what the test is doing. I'm checking some addition. Now I want to do an assert equals, say 2 + 2 = 4. Then what am I expecting? I'm expecting 4. And it starts with 2 + 2. So the assert equals has not been imported yet. So I'm going to do an Alt-Enter in Eclipse. And I'm going to choose static import method. You can see here we have an assert equals coming in from or.JUnit and an assert equals coming in from JUnit.framework. This one has been deprecated, which means that in a future version of JUnit it's likely to be removed. So we'll choose the one that is not likely to be removed. That will keep us forward compatibility for a while. And you can see here it has imported statically JUnit.framework.assert equals. If I run the test by right clicking on this and doing run 2 + 2 = 4, the test will run and you can see that it has passed successfully. So what would happen if I change the message? Well, let's leave the message. What would happen if I change the test? So 2 + 2 = 4. I'm going to say that I'm expecting 2 + 2 to = 5. Let's see what happens. So you can see, because I put this message in, 2 + 2 = 4, that is what is displayed in the output. The more that we make this descriptive, the more that we make this so that it helps us debug our tests, the more useful it is in terms of helping us pinpoint problems and documenting the test. So 2 + 2 = 4, I expected 5, but the actual answer was 4. So from this we can easily see that I actually got the expected number incorrect. I could have made this something like addition should be done correctly. Let me change this back to 5. And when I run this, we see addition should be done correctly, expected 5, but was 4. In order to debug this, I'm going to have to go into the test. This link here should take me exactly to the line that has the problem. I can analyze it and see addition should be done correctly. Clearly this should be 4, like that. Now let's have a look and see what happens if I don't put the message in. I'll make the test fail. So you can see here we now have an assertion failed error. We expected 5, we actually got 4. Okay, that from here I have no idea what context this happened in, so I have to go to the line. Now here it's obvious what's going on. In other cases, when you start writing lots and lots of tests on your application, over time you'll forget, possibly, why that test is checking the things it's supposed to check. That's why the test name is really important, and that's why putting a descriptive message into your certs is really important. So if you get in the habit now of doing this, it's a practice that you'll carry on going forwards. So I'm going to make this 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's a very simple example. Normally I wouldn't necessarily repeat the calculation in here, but I'm going to do that. And I'll fix it so it's correct. So there we go. Now I have a valid test again. 2 plus 2 equals 4. And because this is called test, if I did maven test from the command line, this would run. In fact, we can try that. So if I bring up conemu, I'll go to my project. So if I do maven test, it has failed. Okay, so that's got a Java runtime 1.7.0. The compiler may be using a different version. So let me try a maven clean compile on this. Maven test. So you can see that's running now, and that's because when I did a Maven test, it was using the compiled versions that had been compiled in the IDE. And the Java runtime, or that it's using from the command line, is clearly different from the version that was in the compiler. So I may have to change my settings. So I suspect Java has updated in the background and the correct JDK has not been downloaded. So if you experience something like that, you can see that there's nothing major going wrong. It's not something you've done. But when you've run it from the command line, do the compile first so that everything is up to date with the version that you've got running in there. So let's have a look and see what happened. So you can see here that JUnit example test has been picked up. The Selenium test, the WebDriver test that we put in has been picked up. And we did not have to do anything. We didn't have to add anything into the POM. They were picked up through the Maven test job simply because they have test in the name and they're under the test package in the Maven project.